The Caledonian Forest is the name given to the former temperate rainforest of Scotland. The name comes to us from Pliny the Elder, who tells us that 30 years after the Roman invasion of Britain the knowledge of it did not extend beyond the neighbourhood of Silva, Caledonia. He gives no information about where Silva, Caledonia was, but the known extent of the Roman occupation suggests that it was north of the Clyde and west of the Tay.The Scots pines of the Caledonian Forest are directly descended from the first pines to arrive in Scotland following the Ice Age, arriving about 7000 BCE. The forest reached its maximum extent about 5000 BCE, after which the Scottish climate became wetter and windier. This changed climate reduced the extent of the forest significantly by 2000 BCE. For that date, human actions reduced it to its current extent. Today, that forest exists as 35 remnants, as authenticated by Stephen and Amp Carlyle, covering about 180 square kilometers. The Scots pines of these remnants are, by definition, directly descended from the first pines to arrive in Scotland following the Ice Age. These remnants have adapted genetically to different Scottish environments, and as such, are globally unique. Their ecological characteristics form an unbroken 9,000-year chain of natural evolution with a distinct variety of soils, vegetation, and animals. To a great extent, the remnants survived on land that was either too steep, too rocky, or too remote to be agriculturally useful. The largest remnants are in Strathspey and Strathd, on highly acidic, freely drained glacial deposits that are of little value for cultivation and domestic stock. An examination of the earliest maps of Scotland suggests that the extent of the Caledonian Forest remnants has changed little since 1600 AD. History. Trees began to recolonize what is now the British Isles over a land bridge which is now beneath the Strait of Dover. Forests of this type were found all over what is now the island of Great Britain for a few thousand years, before the climate began to slowly warm in the Atlantic period, and the temperate coniferous forests began retreating north into the Scottish Highlands, the last remaining climatic region suitable for them in the British Isles. The native pinewoods which formed this westernmost outpost of the boreal forest of post-glacial Europe are estimated to have covered 15,000 square kilometers as a vast wilderness of Scots pine, birch, rowan, aspen, juniper, oak and a few other hardy species. On the west coast, oak and birch predominated in a temperate rainforest ecosystem rich in ferns, mosses and lichens. Legend and folklore. In Arthurian lore and early literature, the forest is the site of one of King Arthur's 12 battles, according to the Historia Britannicum, in which the battle is called Catcoit Celadon. Scholars Rachel Bromwich and Marge Haycock suggest that the army of trees animated by sorcerers in the Old Welsh poem Cadgodw are intended to be the Caledonian Forest. In related Merlin literature, the figure of Merlin Wild retreated to these woods in his madness after the Battle of Arthureth in the year 573. He fled from the alleged wrath of the King of Strathclyde, Rutherkyle, after the slaying of Gwendolen ap Cedio. This is written in the two Merlinic poems in Middle Welsh Iroenania Fallena in the Black Book of Carmarthen. The forest is also the retreat of another character named Lailoken from the Vita Cantigene, who also fled into the woods in a fit of madness and who may be the original model for Merlin Wild. In the Middle Welsh story Culhwch Olwen, the main character Culhwch is the son of a king named Celadon Wledig, who may or may not be related to the forest in name. Another figure from the same story, Sildia Wild, hints at a close relationship of the forest being a retreat for people who suffered from a special kind of madness Wild. In line 994 to 996 of the story, it is briefly explained. a child deer wilt yuaballad nuathone galan a chimhil yssu caland dat akamhini ydeth deer yg wilt. Though not named directly, the very name Caledonian wilt is close to the two related notions of the forest of Caledon being where people suffering madness wilt hide, wildlife being a unique ecosystem in the British Isles. The Caledonian pinewoods are home to some of the country's rarest wildlife. It is considered to be one of the last remaining wildernesses in the British Isles. Breeding bird species in Caledonian pine forests found breeding nowhere else in the British Isles. Capercaillie, common golden eye, crested tit, parrot crossbill, Scottish crossbill, breeding bird species in Caledonian pine forests rare elsewhere in the British Isles. Black grouse, common crossbill, goosander, siskin, red pole, long-eared owl, osprey, red-breasted merganser, redwing, Temminck's stint, wood sandpiper, Slavonian grebe, golden eagle, mammal species present in Caledonian pine forests, European beaver, feral goat, mountain hare, pine marten, red deer, red fox, red squirrel, roe deer, wild cat, mammal species extinct in Caledonian pine forests, aurochs, brown bear, Eurasian lynx, grey wolf, elk, tarpan, wild boar. Conservation. A review of the native pinewoods of Scotland. Stephen and Amp Carlyle highlighted the plight of the remaining 35 ancient pinewood sites, many of which had been damaged by felling, fire and intensive grazing from sheep and deer. A later review in the 1980s showed that further damage had occurred through ploughing and planting with non-native conifers with less than 12,000 hectares of the ancient habitat remaining. A subsequent guide to the ancient pinewoods reviews the conservation story and provides a summary of the management in each site as well as a guide on how to reach all the woods using public transport, walking and cycling. Much of remaining Caledonian pine forest is fully protected, and much of the forest now lies within the Cairngorms National Park. The Royal Society for the Protection of Birds and the Forestry Commission also own several areas of pinewood on the reserves. One of the largest remaining areas is Ballaghbuie Forest on the Balmoral Estate, which is protected as a special area of conservation under the European Union Habitats Directive. Scientific research continues on the ecology of the Caledonian forest and its restoration. Populations of the rare ground cover Linnea borealis may be too isolated from one another to produce viable seed. Diversity of fungi has also been affected by the decrease in habitat. The agaric fungus Mycena purpurea fusca is commonly found in Caledonian pine woods, and it is considered an indicator species for that habitat type. Fire appears to increase the natural recruitment of Scots pine seedlings. Reintroductions. In recent years, there has been a growing interest to reintroduce animals which are currently extinct in Great Britain, back into Caledonian pine forests. Corporations have been set up to persuade the government to allow this. The long-running campaign to reintroduce European beavers to Knapdale in Argyll has been successful, and there is some support for the reintroduction of the grey wolf and Eurasian lynx. Recently, some landowners have announced plans to build large game reserves on the land and release the species within them. Paul Lister plans to release Eurasian lynx, brown bear, grey wolf, elk, wild boar and species already present in Scotland into a huge 200 square kilometres enclosure at his estate, Allerdale. Although releasing top predators such as wolves and bears has become a difficult proposition with local and national regulations, an initial trial enclosure of 5.5 square kilometres was built with elk, wild boar, red deer and roe deer. Remaining pinewoods. Bain lists 38 ancient pinewood sites in Britain which have been identified as the most genuinely native and natural. All of them occur in the Scottish Highlands. The Caledonian Pinewood Inventory identifies 84 pinewood sites, which includes smaller subunits of the main sites. A new comprehensive survey of the native woodlands of Scotland from Forestry Commission Scotland and supported by Scottish Natural Heritage is due to be completed in 2014. Abernethy Forest, Achnacellig Forest, Ardgour Pinewoods, Ballochbuie Forest, Balmoral Castle, Inagwood, Glen Affric, Glen Barrisdale, Glengarry, Glenloyne, Glenmore Forest Park, Inshriach Forest, Ord Iquish, Rothy Mercus Forest,